Tonight on Localite with John Compton, Mark Steighner shares his love of music, teaching, composing, and more. Mark has been composing music since his teens. He now works for Hood River Schools as the high school music teacher, and he's also the conductor behind the Columbia Gorge Orchestra Association. That's all coming up right now on Localite.
Well, Mark, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.
It's nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
So tell me about this. You started out, you were raised in Southern California.
Raised in Redondo Beach.
Redondo Beach.
Redondo Beach.
Okay. What nice area.
Beautiful area, yeah.
Was it a musical family? Was your family inclined that way?
Well, they were artistic. They appreciated the arts. My mother played the piano, and my father appreciated listening to music, but they weren't in particular musical. Yeah.
At what point did you start to kind of get interested?
Well, in elementary school, back then we started music, I think in 4th grade. We started band instruments really early on, and I think I had a music teacher about 6th, 7th grade who one day played some really interesting avant-garde music for us, way over our heads, and something just kind of connected, and that just sparked an interest for me, and kind of took off from there, I think.
What was the first instrument that you really kind of gravitated towards and picked
Well,
up?
I played saxophone, I played oboe and bassoon in high school. I was never a great instrumentalist. That was never my thing. I wanted to be a composer, and I loved music history and theory and that kind of stuff. So I'm an adequate, instrumentalist in lots of different things, but I'm not a great player.
Yeah. Well,
pretty good piano player, I guess.
You're what now?
Pretty good piano player.
Ah, okay.
For certain things.
Yeah. Well, so composing, that is, and I want to really learn about what that means to compose music and all of the facets that go along with that. But when did you know that at a real young age that you wanted to be a composer? Like, I didn't even know what a composer was until I was probably in my teens.
Right. There was something, I remember when I was really young, I wanted to write a symphony, and I didn't know how you did it. I just knew that you had to do it somehow, so I didn't realize that conductors use the score, where all the instruments are on one page. And so I was trying to do it one instrument at a time, probably 10 or 9, I don't remember, something like that. So then I finally learned how it actually comes together. It's way easier. And I've always been a big fan of technology and music technology in particular. So, ever since the 80s, there's been notation programs, so it's all done on the computer. You don't have to do anything by hand anymore.
All right. So then walk me through putting together an orchestra and then the conducting process and the composing process.
Well, those are kind of, two different things.
Okay.
I mean, putting together an orchestra is, by definition, a certain set of instruments.
All right. Which are?
Traditionally. The woodwinds, which are the flutes and the oboes and the clarinets and the bassoons, and brass are the French horns and the trumpets and trombones.
Okay.
And then percussion and strings, right? So that's been an orchestra since the 18th century.
All right.
Pretty much hasn't changed much. It's been expanded and contracted, but it's the same group.
Okay.
So, in terms of conducting the orchestra, it's studying the music and learning the ins and outs and kind of thinking like a composer. So what conductors do, I think, is kind of reverse engineer the music. So if you're conducting a Schubert symphony, you look at it like Schubert probably looked at it as a composer. Why did he do things in this way, and learn to anticipate what's coming up next.
Okay.
So I would think that's what a conductor does. That's
and
what
you
I
don't
do anyway.
Do you do much conducting?
Well, for the orchestra, I do. Yeah.
Okay. So, the composing.
And for the school groups that I conduct also.
Right, because you're also a music teacher at the high school.
I am.
Or the music teacher at the high school.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, the music teacher.
Yeah. But so then the actual composing of the music. You mentioned earlier, there's programs now that can kind of help with that. But you have to identify every part and piece that somebody's going to play and all of that.
Right. Well, there's a couple stages, and I guess everybody does it a different way. I mean, the first stage is you're writing the music, you're working at the harmony, you're working at the melody and the rhythm, and you're doing a sketch, basically, right? And it would be like an artist doing a pencil sketch of a painting.
Or in my business, like a storyboard.
Storyboard, right. And I've done storyboards for things too, it's exactly like that. And then you take that and then you flesh it out for the whole orchestra. So you orchestrate it. You decide who's going to do what, play these parts here. And that changes a lot as it goes too. So most composers do that, I think. I don't think any of them write it for the whole orchestra from the beginning. So for instance, I'm working on a musical that I'm writing for the high school, and part of that is orchestrating it for the pit band. So rather than try to sketch it and then orchestrate it later, I'm actually doing all the orchestration at the same time as I'm writing it to save a step. So it takes a little longer, but then you don't have to go back and do that other thing again.
Now, I know with some musicians, they'll, when they're using sort of the model of a band, when they're putting their band together, a lot of what I've been told is that they will, when they're writing their music, they'll write it and then find somebody that they want in their band to play it. Is it sort of that way with an orchestra? Does one kind of come before the other usually, or?
Well, I think, for instance, if I'm writing a piece for the orchestra, for our orchestra, I would take into consideration where the strong players are, and I would try to tailor it to that group. For instance, I've written a tuba concerto for our orchestra because we had a great tuba player and I wanted to feature the tuba, so I wrote a concerto for him. Or the timpani, I wrote a timpani concerto last year because we had a great timpani player. It's an instrument that, sits in the back, and you don't ever get to hear the kettle drums very much, and so here's a piece that features the kettle drums.
Okay.
So for things like that, you're taking into consideration those players, but in general, an orchestra is an orchestra, and the ranges of what people can play.
All right.
And what an oboe sounds good doing. For instance, all oboes sound good in this range, and they don't sound good in this part. So that's just something you learn about orchestration as you learn to write music.
Okay. Well, when we come back, I want to talk about, because we're going to take a quick break, but I want to actually talk about the Columbia Gorge Orchestra Association, which may come as a surprise to many people.
Yeah,
I certainly hadn't heard of you guys, and so pretty cool stuff. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll learn more about the Columbia Gorge Orchestra Association. We'll be right back.
Coming up,
the Orchestra Association is a nonprofit umbrella, and we formed it about 6 years ago. The orchestra used to be managed by the Portland Chamber Music Society.